Hi, my name is Jess and welcome to my channel, Reads with the Ravenclaw. So literally about 2 hours ago I finished my A-level exams for this year. So after weeks of not really uploading anything at all, I'm going to be coming at you with a review of A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J Maas, which is the final book, the finale of the trilogy of the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. Does this series have a name, or is it just, I think it's just the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and that is Reflecting. That's quite fun. I finished this book about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, but I've been saving it to review until I knew my exams were all over and I could get really excited without the crushing weight of revision getting me down. I'm going to start out doing a spoiler-free review. I think most of this is probably going to be a spoiler-free review. It depends how much I go on, but I will give you good warning when I come up to the spoiler section at the end, so don't worry about being spoiled. You can carry on watching and I'll let you know when you've got to leave, when you've got to take the exit if you don't want to be spoiled. Generally speaking, finales are really difficult books to get right for me. I often love them because I really like seeing all of my characters reach the end of their character arcs. I really like seeing everything kind of settle down, but I also tend to feel like finales never really go as hard, especially in trilogies. I always find that the first or second books tend to be the strongest ones in trilogies and the finale the weakest. And I don't think that this is the weakest book in the series. I will give that title to A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I didn't really like, but I do not think that this was better or stronger than A Court of Mist and Fury. The second book in this series is definitely the best book of the series in my opinion. That being said, I did really enjoy this book and I ended up giving it a... I'm trying to think whether to be generous or not. No, I ended up giving it a 3.75 out of 5 stars, and I know that might seem a little bit harsh considering I gave A Court of Mist and Fury like 4.75 stars. I might have even given it 5 stars, I can't quite remember now, but looking back on it and thinking back on it and reflecting on it, I definitely think for me that that was the right rating, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about why. Without being spoilery, I'm going to discuss the things that I did like about this book. First thing that I really loved was seeing Feyre's development as a character kind of play out particularly over A Court of Mist and Fury. We really see her grow and develop as a character, but we kind of leave her at that point where she's reached her like pinnacle of growth, and I really like seeing that new developed Feyre throughout the course of this book without that development process, and really seeing how much she truly had changed and learned, and that was a really rewarding aspect of this book for me. I definitely wouldn't say that she is my favourite fantasy female protagonist, but I have gained a lot of respect for her over the series, and my opinion has really changed from her in book 1 when I found her very flat and quite boring and quite passive. And looking back on it, I now kind of see that that is very likely how Sarah J Maas wanted her to come across, so we could see this wonderful character development, and I definitely think for me that was the highlight of this book, just seeing Feyre have a lot of agency, seeing her really own it. I loved that. I also really loved the group dynamics in this book. We met all of the Night Court characters in the last book and they were one of my favourite aspects of that book, and I have got to give like credit where it's due, and Sarah J Maas does write really good character scenes. She's really good at scenes where you've got a lot of characters in at once, and whilst I have complained before of just how her character development in this book and in the other series can kind of veer off course, I do think that she's at her best writing when there are just loads of different personalities in the room, because she really does great at playing those personalities off against each other. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that we do see some more of Feyre's sisters in this book, because we've seen them in the last book as well, and I really enjoyed that as well, because we've seen a lot of romantic dynamics to do with Feyre, we've seen friendship dynamics to do with Feyre, and bringing in that family bond again was just really interesting and lovely to see, because we haven't really seen much of that over the first 2 books. Speaking of Sarah J Maas's group dynamic scenes, I also think that she writes like large scale scenes very well. Like a lot of her combat I find quite easy to follow, but not so easy to follow that I feel like it's just being reported back to me. Sometimes when I read fantasy I can find combat in particular quite exhausting to read about, because I feel like sometimes they won't reference the names fast enough, maybe the moves and the movements aren't kind of phrased correctly, so I can't picture them in my head. But every single time Sarah J Maas writes combat, I feel like I have a really strong idea of what's going on, of where everybody is, of what they're doing, and I really appreciate that in a fantasy book, because it allows me to be really caught up in like battle scenes as opposed to just like taken out of the story because I'm not sure what's going on. So that was another thing that I thought that she did really, really well in this novel. So those are the non-spoilery things that I did like, and in terms of the non-spoilery things that I wasn't too keen on, I still think that Sarah J Maas writes terrible sex scenes. I'm not judging you at all if you enjoyed them, you know, each to their own, that's totally fine, but it's just some of her word choices are very questionable. Like, I really don't think it's necessary for men to like growl all the time or like claim women. Like, it just kind of, it makes me cringe and I want to skip them, and then I just feel like I've been taken out of the story because I've skipped them. So yeah, her sex scenes did not grow on me in this book at all. I would also say that as a finale, like with many other finales, I just don't feel like it pushed hard enough. I understand that finales must be really difficult books to write. I mean, you've spent 2 books building up to it, you've got all of these ends to kind of tie together, you want to reach that like high point, and you know, as with so many of the book series, I just feel like this really fell short of that. It just didn't go as hard as I wanted to, it didn't hit me as emotionally as I wanted it to. It definitely did not have the same emotional impact on me that Akamath did. Yeah, I wanted this to be stronger than Akamath. I really wanted it to push for that emotional punch, and I just don't quite feel like it delivered. And I think that's really why my rating didn't hit the 4 stars, just because as a finale I wanted it to be more than it was. And I'm not saying I didn't enjoy this book, like for how long it is I completely rushed through it. I really loved seeing all of the characters again and listening to their voices again, and like I've said, I think that Sarah J Maas does a really good job of developing those character voices and of those character dynamics, but I just expected more of the finale, and I think my disappointment really is reflected in my rating. This is not a bad book, it's a really good and it's a really enjoyable book. It's just not quite the book that I really wanted it to be, and that's why my rating's a little bit lower. That being said, I still enjoyed it despite the problems that I have with it, which I think is a testament to just how enjoyable the series is in general. I do think that Sarah J Maas, while she isn't the most amazing fantasy writer out there, she writes some of the most addictive fantasy, and it's just so much fun to read. I just eat it up. Now I'm going to be talking about like some more spoilery things. I'm not going to like go through the entire book in detail because that would be a massive video, but I've written down some things that I just want to discuss. So if you have not read A Court of Wings and Ruin, now is the time to go away and do so if you don't want to be spoiled. So goodbye. I really liked seeing Feyre in the Spring Court in the beginning of this book. Thought I was going to find it really annoying, and I remember being really annoyed reading Akamath, just the knowledge that she was going to be back there. I didn't want to have to struggle through it, but to be honest, she wasn't actually at the Spring Court for as long as I'd feared that she was, and the time she was there, just watching her just like take revenge on everybody was just the most satisfying thing that I can possibly think of. I felt like a proud mum just like egging her on from the sidelines, like, yeah Feyre, you do that Feyre, you just take him down Feyre. High point for me was definitely when she smashed like I'm gonna say Ianthe, when she smashed Ianthe's hand. That just, oh, that felt really, really good. I loved watching that terrible, terrible woman just like get what she deserved. And I loved that it was Feyre that was the one that was giving it to her. I wanted that since Akamath. I also really loved Nesta, and this was definitely like against my will. I did not want to love or like Nesta. I felt like in book 1 she was so problematic, and even in book 2 when we get that like really cool point as she goes down into the cauldron at the King of Hybern, I still wasn't sold on her character, just because I did kind of see her behaviour towards Feyre not as unforgivable, because I think it's very hard in fantasy to have something like, you know, childhood tension be unforgivable, but I just didn't like her as a character. I didn't warm to her at all, which is very rare for me because often I really like the cold characters because I find them interesting. So I was really worried about how Sarah J Maas was going to handle her in this book, but I just thought that she was great, and I'm crossing my fingers that the spin-off series has Nesta either as a main character, like a central character, or as the protagonist herself, because I honestly think she is fascinating reading this book, and I think her dynamic with Cassian is just wonderful. I definitely think that should she like handle Nesta and Cassian right, they could easily rival Feyre and Rhysand for my favourite couple in this world, just because I think that their dynamic is incredible. I know that's kind of obvious, but we're gonna call the mating bond now. Like, there's definitely a mating bond between those two, it has to be. Fortunately though, these spoilers are not going to all be really gushy, because there are some things that I wasn't as keen on that I really want to discuss. And the first one is going to be about Mor and Azrael. So in in this book we find out that Maas, although she sleeps with men, although she enjoys having sex with men, she is romantically attracted to women. And I'm not like deliberately skirting around any terms or anything, I'm just not really sure how Maas would identify in the world, so I don't want to like lay down a term that I'm not sure like is what she would use. I really just don't feel like I know enough to do something like that. She couldn't just therefore let Azrae have no partner. She had to bring him into this weird love triangle-y thing with Elaine and Lucian, and that just felt really weird. It's like, oh well, I can't put him with Maas now, let's just find him another romantic partner to have. Not everybody has to have a romantic partner, and they do in these books, and I just find it kind of unrealistic and a bit annoying. And speaking of kind of unrealistic, this ending was too neat. Like, honestly, it was way too neat. Did I want any of the characters in the Night Court to die? No, of course I didn't. But it would have made for a more realistic and more impactful ending had somebody died. Rhysand dies and then literally like 2-3 pages later comes back to life. She doesn't even let there be a gap for that emotional kind of impact to settle in before she's like, oh look, he's alive again. And honestly, I could have moved straight past that because I did not want Rhysand to die. I would have been devastated if he had not made it through these books just after finding Feyre. But it was the fact that after bringing Rhysand back to life, he was like, oh hey, you guys miss Amren? And then he pulls her out of the cauldron too. I thought that Amren's sacrifice was beautiful. I thought that her whole speech about experiencing human feelings and her past life was wonderful, and I definitely feel like her self-sacrificing ending would have completed that character arc perfectly. I don't think that they had to bring Amren back. Did I want her to die? No, but I feel like for this story it maybe needed to happen, it maybe would have been more fitting for it to happen, and I definitely feel like it would have left me with more of emotional impact had it happened. I also felt like there were just a few too many loose threads, especially between like Akamath and Akawar, and then Akawar's just end in general. And I know that there were going to be companion series, but it just did not feel like enough of a finale for me when they'd set up all of these like plot holes that they didn't fill yet. There's all these plot threads that they hadn't pulled together. I guess, and I know that this is probably because she's saving those for the companion series, but then don't make them play such a prevalent role in this series if you don't intend to carry them through even a little bit. An example of this would be the fact that Hellion is Lucian's dad. Like, that was a massive thing when it happened, and I remember being like, oh wow, that's such a great twist. But it's just never really like continued, and that makes me think that Lucian's probably going to be quite a big bit of the companion novel, and it might focus more on the sisters and that kind of thing. But still, I would have liked to get some closure on that. I would have liked to see maybe Hellion like acknowledge it to Feyre. Speaking of Hellion, like slightly random tangent, the entire time I read this book I pictured him as Zeus from Disney's Hercules. Like, everyone else is like really vivid and human in my mind, and then he's just this like little cartoon god with lightning bolts just sat in the corner. So yeah, the ending was both too neat and not neat enough in my opinion. It didn't tie up the storylines that I felt needed a tiny bit more closure, even if she wanted to like reserve some tension from the companion series, and it tied up certain like lines to do with death way too neatly for it to have the emotional impact that I wanted it to have. Also, I've just remembered, I would have liked if they'd like done a little bit more of Tamlin's character, and I never thought that you'd hear me saying that because like I hate Tamlin. I think he's a complete douche. I just didn't like how he was handled in this book. Like, he goes from being just a terrible, raging mess to kind of saving Feyre's life to then going like, I hope you'll be happy. And I kind of understand that arc, and I do understand that he loved her a little bit throughout it, but I just feel like she was trying to make Tamlin redeemable without spending enough time with him and his thought process to make him truly redeemable. I think he could have been redeemed, but it would have taken some serious like author work, it would have taken some serious like processing, and I just don't feel like she spent enough time with it for that to really happen, and I kind of hated him as much when I finished this book as when I began it. So I think that's really all I've got to say about this book. I know that like for the past 5 minutes or so I've just been ranting about all the stuff that I didn't like, but like I said, and I will like reiterate this, I did enjoy this book. I do think that I'm like satisfied with Rhysand and Feyre's story, even if I wasn't so keen on like the external parts, and I do think that largely this is Feyre's story, and then Feyre and Rhysand's love story later on, and in terms of a closure, closure with that kind of set of things. I really did like it. So as I said, I gave A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J Maas a 3.75 out of 5 stars, and I fully intend to read any companion novels that she releases, as long as Nesta's a protagonist. Okay, thank you for watching this review. I'm hoping that now I have a lot more free time because my exams are over. I will be uploading more regularly, so hopefully I will see you soon, and goodbye.